Good morning. Some months ago I went to a location near London and picked up some audio equipment. We met Joe Caithness there. Now I'm going to go and visit him today in his studios. It's a long journey. How far, Scott?
249 miles.
All right. Okay, so we won't do it all and back in one day because on the way back I'll visit Chris Squires and return this video recorder I repaired for him. So let's get started, Scott.
Okay, let's go.
Welcome to Bradford, Nottingham, and the home of my mastering studio.
Oh, right. Through the garden.
Yep. So built this about 4 years ago. And this is my cat Inca, on camera. This is absolutely gorgeous. This is one of my cats. He's famous now. You've been it, girl. So this is where I work from. Come on in.
So I'm sure your studio is much more impressive than mine.
It's smaller, I think.
Oh right, yes it
I've
is.
got less stuff.
Stuff will be my problem. So hello again, Joe.
Hello.
Last time we met somewhere near London, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, somewhere with a godforsaken roundabout. Is it Hemel Hempstead?
Right.
somewhere like that. I can't remember.
We were collecting some mostly PCM 1630 equipment, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I had a PCM 1630 digital audio encoder, which didn't work.
Yes.
And you had the 1630, I think it was supposed to work.
Yes.
And I had a DMR 4000 Pneumatic player, which did work after very little work. And I think you had the DMR 2000.
Yes.
Which is the one that doesn't have the dual channel outputs. So it doesn't do the RAR function. So it really was intended to use with the 1610 decoder. But I must say, I found the RAR function virtually useless. It doesn't help us at all.
I mean, it's fairly old at this point. It's older than me, I think. So
yeah, the kit it was always a fragile format.
Yeah.
And you guys must get so fed up when you get the audio files from these. They're full of pops. It sounds like DAB radio.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. It's just that even when they were new, you could get a printout. I've got the piece of kit that can do that, of all the errors on the tape. You know, and this is what you're supposed to use to master CDs, but that's
it got replaced as quickly as possible, I think.
Yeah.
That stuff did. So yeah, this is my studio.
Oh yeah, well let's have a look. Show us around.
And the reason why you're here is I've got some stuff to gift on because I got a load of stuff, played with it, sort of learned about it, tried it, realised I really couldn't be bothered to fix it. I thought I could either watch lots of your videos and try and learn how to do it, or I could just give it to you and you could just do it, which is, I'm very busy with mastering and stuff. So it was fun during lockdown and everything, like a lot of things. I mean, luckily I didn't buy a puppy or anything. So like some people did, I just bought a lot of useless old
kit,
stuff. So this is my studio, where I mostly do audio mastering. I do mastering for digital and I do restoration, transfer. I do pre-mastering for vinyl as well as doing select transfer formats, so analog formats mostly.
I just love that. Come on, let's have a look at this tape recorder. This is gorgeous.
So we've got a couple of bits here. So these are predominantly master recorders, which is why I use them, because they're the sort of thing that people will want to get a straight remaster done off these formats. So PCM 1630, etc., was generally more for production formats, whereas these are master recording formats.
So what, multi-channel? Or I mean, that's not multi-channel, is it?
No, these are all two-channel. So everything I do is two-channel. I've literally just got one sound card, I've got one connection into it, and I've got all the different matrixing to get into it. So this is a 1/4-inch 2-track master recorder. So there are the majority of master recordings done of the actual mix down that would then be sent to the mastering place, or copies of the master recordings as a tape copy would be on 1/4-inch. There's also 1/2-inch, which was a slightly later, more hi-fi version where you get slightly better high frequency response, slightly better crosstalk, but it's very expensive, and you can actually swap the head blocks out on some of the machines, but they're the really expensive ones.
I had a Tascam Model 52.
Right.
Which was quite similar to that, I think. Layout was a little different. Tape counter was in different places.
Yeah, so
it died.
Right. So the reason why I've got one of these, and the reason why these are quite good to have, is that they are the last pro recorder the BBC used. So there's a lot of them in the UK, and you can still get quite a lot of the machine parts for them, as well as you can get the heads relapped. So this is a very good workhorse. It's one of the last professional recorders that Tascam made for 2-track recording, and this has got the multi-speed on it, so you can do 2 different speeds, and then so it's 7.5 and 15 IPS, and you can also do manual speed changes, and you've also got either fixed input and output, or you can do variable input and output. So if you've got a dodgy tape where you know that you put the tones through and you can see that it's off, you can then manually do that, and you can actually do it with test tones and get it absolutely perfect on the recording, which is the proper way to transfer master tape. You've also got some really good transport automation stuff, which is really top end business. So you can actually tell it what size spools are on each side, and it has a manual tension adjuster inside. So it has a little computer which will adjust the tension and the speed that it's going depending on how you're loading it on either side. Whereas some of the consumer units, they're usually just designed for one size. So you would buy it and you'd buy the stock of the tape. Whereas I can actually do 5-inch all the way up to 10.5-inch transfers off here, and they are completely perfectly pitch stable. So I've done consumer recordings, personal recordings that were done on a little, handheld portable thing, but I'm able to spool it onto this deck and get it to transfer perfectly, which is why these were used a lot at the BBC, because they could take anything out of their archive, load it onto the same machine, spool it up, and it would be exactly as expected, and it would function the same. So this is a really brilliant workhorse machine. I've got 2 other machines down here. So I've got 2 other recordings formats here, recording master recorders, 2-track recorders. This is a Tascam 112 Mark II. There's also a 122, which is a slightly posher version, but they're quite hard to get hold of these days. There's also a Mark III of this. Again, very similar in the sort of utilitarian design as this Tascam. You've got these 3 massive analog potentiometers, so you can do very, very fine tuning of any test tones, etc. And then you've also got, I'll just power these up because they look cool when they're on as well.
Right. Don't touch the speaker, because that looks expensive.
Yeah, there's a beryllium tweeter. It's like the thinnest metal you can get.
Right, yes.
So, yeah, we've got 2 other master recorders down here, which I use for transferring stuff from the archives. So we've got a Tascam 112 Mark II, which is it's like their second from highest, late 80s, early 90s master tape recorder. So you can do manual pitch control, as you can do on that. You've got a couple of different locations you can set, and then you've got lots of different monitoring options. It's got full Dolby noise reduction built in. You've also got headphones for quality control, and you've got these really gorgeous
proper VU meters.
Yeah, proper front lit, proper VU meters. And that's what I use for transferring cassette tapes. So sometimes I'll get projects where I'll have stuff on different formats and I need to all get them into one unified session. So I take control of that, and if there's anything that I can't transfer, I then get somebody else who can do it to get it in, and then we sort of do as much as we can in-house. Most of my clients trust me to deal with that stuff, so I try to keep all of this perfectly maintained and working. And then we've got the D5 Fostex DAT machine at the bottom here, which is probably second or third from the top of the line that Fostex did at that time. You also see these under various other brands. I think it's Tascam. I think I've got one over there actually. And there's a couple of other ones that basically are the same thing, rebranded, some slightly different internal parts. But this is another workhorse. It does 44.1, 48 kilohertz. So it does almost every DAT under the sun, apart from the really obscure 24-bit DATs.
I've got a machine for that.
Yeah, so that's there's not. I don't think many people have those.
Only Tascam made it, and I've actually got 2.
Right. Okay. Well, if I ever get it, send it to you. Yeah. And again, same sort of thing. You've got lots of this is not quite as fancy because you've only got the one balance control. You don't have potentiometers for everything. But with DAT, because it's a digital recorder, generally they'd be coming off an analog desk, which should hopefully just be the master recorder out, which should be pretty balanced, or coming off a digital multi-track. So it's not quite as difficult to align than with the analog formats. So yeah, those are the 3 formats which I generally do in-house for that. I also do. There's a lot of crap over it. Excuse me.
By the way, I should mention what my own tape recorder is. Have you seen it? I've got a
possibly.
what is it now? Ferrograph.
Oh yeah,
So it's quite old, but it was also a BBC type
Right.
machine, which also takes 10.5 and does 15 IPS. But when I had the Tascam 52, my impression was that the noise floor was a bit better on that,
Right.
just because of the age of it, I think.
Yeah, well, I got this serviced and all the pots and everything checked in 2020. There's this chap called Real Resilience in the Peak District. Because I like driving around the Peak Districts anyway, it's fun if you've got a day to take. It's very, very heavy. This is. It's a lot heavier than it looks. Because it's a broadcast unit, so it is designed to be mounted on a moving rack like this. So yeah, and it's another cool thing about it is it's because I love utilitarian equipment. I don't like fancy posh stuff. You can get in and you can clean and service the heads, and you can desolder them in place if you need to.
Right.
So it's a proper, it's the BBC would have had rooms of these, and they would have had a couple of engineers who are set up to
look after them.
Yeah. They're going to try and get that back. I'm not going to push that back on.
You should have done that, don't you?
Yeah. So
actually, that bit broke on my 52.
Right. Okay. Well, you actually, one of the good things about it is, as you well know, with a lot of tapes now, you get shed, and there's one good thing is that you can get in there to get it out. One of the issues compared to my old Studer that I had a couple of Studers and a couple of the Tascams that I've used over the years. I call this area down here the shed dungeon because it's actually open and you can't close it. So one of the few downsides of this machine is it's quite difficult to get in. If you do transfer a lot of sheddy tapes, you do eventually have to take that whole thing out and hoover it up. And obviously the shed turns into
my
oil
machine is sat vertically, so all the crap drops out of the bottom.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons that I'm lucky that I found somebody who can do proper servicing on it, because that's one of the very few things. And top tip for anybody who transfers tapes, be very careful with using alcohol to clean any machinery that when it is either upright properly or like it is on here on like a 45-degree angle, because sometimes you'll have stuff underneath here which has actually got its own lubrication on it and needs to keep the lubrication on. So if you put too much alcohol in it, it drips down, it dries it out, and you can actually damage some stuff. So it's with stuff with belts, that's more common, but there are a couple of tape machines, quarter-inch master machines like this, that have that issue. There's the Studer A810, which I used to use quite a lot, had that issue where if you clean the capstan and a couple other bits, you would actually drip down, and people would think it was knackered, and in reality all they've done is over cleaned it and made the issue. So some people will put little swabs of stuff underneath, and they make a little area to protect that. So yeah, I'll show you some of my other bits as well, just show you what I can do.
And by the way, just this is the brand name that strikes fear into the heart of any audio guy, isn't it?
I've got lots of
Ampex tapes. Oh,
yeah, no. I've got well, that's a good point actually. That leads us on to the other thing I've got up here. So I've got a lot of boxes of test presses here because I've been doing a lot of quality control for a record label. So that's a printer. That's not very exciting, but this here is what I use to bake the tape. So
this is so similar to what I have.
Yeah,
so it's slightly bigger probably, but
it's a digital thermostat dehumidifier, so you can set it at exactly 50
typically. Yeah. What I've done on mine as well is I've added some small fans to the bottom.
Right. Okay.
Moving around.
Yep.
And put the tapes in there for anywhere between about 8 and 24 hours.
Yep.
If they haven't come good after 48 hours, they probably ain't.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a few things where I've had to explain to people that if I can't get it to bake properly, I'm not going to put it through my machine because I'm worried about clogging more than just the heads. You clog the heads, that's half an hour's worth of work to clean it up. But if you clog other stuff, then that's a whole other story. But yeah, so I used to actually use a modified reptile incubation tank.
It's a similar job.
Yeah, it was just a convection thing that has a fairly equal spread, which is obviously what you want for that. So I use that for doing that. It does kick out a lot of heat though, which is a bit of a problem in summer. So I've had a lot of sitting in my shorts working on some masters while baking tapes.
I have the luxury of air conditioning in my studio.
Yeah, unfortunately I haven't quite piped that in. So over here what we have is a couple of my decks. I've got a load more in the house. I think I own 7 or 8 turntables, but this is what I use for quality controlling test pressings. So this is a sort of mid-tier but pretty decent consumer. It's a Pro-ject debut carbon SE. So this is a test pressing. This one comes from GZ Media in Czech Republic. And they actually, one of the nice things they do is they package individually every single test press, and they put all the catalogue numbers, which I can't show you, and all this information about how you should check it. So it's very sort of foolproof. And then you have over here my turntable, which I use for quality control. So every time I have a test pressing, I get 3 copies. The reason you get 3 is if there's a problem with 1, it might be the test pressing. If there was a problem with 2, it might be the press. And if there's a problem with 3, it's a problem with the stamper itself that's making them. So you're ruling out, it's like troubleshooting basically. What I have here is my turntable, and that's hooked up into my mastering converters in the center of the room. And I have a couple of different lights. I have this light for looking at any marks, scratches. I have a couple of different cleaning apparatus here, and some adjustment stuff, and then I've got a couple of different heads. I've never actually used this one. This is a heavy mono head for doing slightly older, like pre-micro groove records. Oh, right. So I actually bought this speculatively for a project, which I ended up finding that I couldn't get a good transfer off the format, so I ended up doing it somewhere else. But I bought that in case I could crack it with this, but because of some speed variations I couldn't do it. A backup cartridge and stylus there, and then we have a couple of the bits and bobs here. These are mostly just for adjustments. A bit of a mess at the moment actually. Cleaning stuff, I've got some more cleaning stuff in the house. I buy a lot of records, so I have some cleaning bits and bobs in there. And what you would do is take the test pressing out of its sealant, and then it will say on it side A, and then not on side B.
So what does side B look like?
Nothing.
Oh, right.
Process of elimination.
Yeah, yeah.
If that's side A.
I mean to say, are the grooves on side B?
Oh, yeah, yeah. So it's a pressed record. So a record master lacquer will be just one side. The stamper, you'll have one for each side, and you put them on a machine, squashes the plastic, that sticks into the middle, and that's what you get either side. So the test pressing is the first time you ever get to have it with 2 sides. So it's the first actual mock-up of the record. So you put it on, you play it. You can also check to see if there's any groove damage. Some people prefer to use DJ turntables for the reason that you can do a bit more manual adjustment for checking out. So like a 1200 or a 1210 Technics. I have a couple of DJ turntables, but they're in the house, so I don't want to move them in here. So I use this, but I can also take photos of it. I have a microscope, which is hidden away at the moment behind all of this stuff over there. But I can take USB photos of any groove damage. And sometimes you'll find that you go through the different test pressings and they'll all have an area of slightly different damage in one part, which means that someone's stuck their finger on the thing or something like that. So I quality control those. I record them into the computer, and I sign or don't sign off and write notes, and I have a recording for everything. So if somebody wants to know, you know, what does this groove damage sound like, you know, I had a thing recently from this pressing plant, and for some reason it was an 8 disc box set, and for some reason one side, the first track, was just really noisy. We got it recut and it was absolutely fine. So it's just one of those things where
and the company that makes them, where do they get their audio from to record on it? How's that handled? Is that not your concern, or how does that
onto the disc?
Yes.
So
how is that delivered to them?
Right. So you've got a couple of different ways. So just a quick explanation of the vinyl production sort of cycle, and then depending on how you do it, you do different people at different stage. So I make a digital production master, which is strictly called a vinyl pre-master, but most people just call it the master or the mastering, because the actual master in vinyl is a physical thing because it's an analog format. So it can feel pedantic, but at the same time, if you're saying like, oh, there's some problems with the master,
what are you talking about?
What you're talking about is a problem with the disc. So we call it vinyl pre-mastering, but it's one of those things where you would usually say the mastering and then the cutting, and the cutting is actually the mastering. So what you do is you get a aluminium disc covered in lacquer, a bit like nail varnish, and it's the size bigger than the record you're actually making. So it's a 14-inch for a 12-inch record, and you physically cut. It's basically the opposite of a stylus, and you usually use like a diamond or a ruby. You cut into this lacquer. You make one for each side. You send that to the stamper facility, which for this case of GZ, they they're a monolithic, humongous company. They're basically a city that just makes records in the Czech Republic. But you can actually get stampers done as a place called Stamper Discs in Yorkshire, which is does a lot of the plants for the UK.
And do you deliver the content to them?
Yeah. So,
and if so, how? What I'm getting at is what.
Right.
Do you deliver that digitally?
Yeah. So I don't do any cutting here. I send that either to a mastering engineer who can cut, or I send it to the plant who will do that cut. Right. So there are a couple of different ways of doing it. In the olden days, all mastering was cutting vinyl, and obviously CDs, PCM 1630, etc. come along, and it becomes to blur the lines. Whereas these days, most people are just preparing a digital file, and they do all the edits, fades, volume adjustments, EQ adjustments, all the quality control of that, and then we'll send that off with like a list for the metadata, track times, etc., sides, and you align that up with the files, send that over, Dropbox, WeTransfer, whatever, and they pick that up, and then they cut that at the
what sort of specification is that? Is that CD quality or
I mean, anything. It's because the thing is with analog audio is that if you can turn it into an electrical signal, you can turn it into an analog thing. So it doesn't really matter. But generally what we will do is we'll do it at the native sample rate, which is usually 44.1 for most independent releases. Sometimes it's higher. 24-bit, it doesn't really make a huge, don't tell anybody this, but it doesn't really make a humongous difference. Don't have the audio files in the comments getting quite angry, because the signal to noise ratio on an analog disc is always going to be lower than 16-bit audio, but there's no point truncating it or adding extra noise by adding dither, so we send it 24.
Because I was watching a thing about vinyl mastering done in Australia, and they said the first thing we do is play the CD.
Okay, so that's probably that might be someone doing lathe cuts or one-offs where they have a more mechanical setup. With all the pressing plants, what they'll do is they'll play it off a computer through a mastering quality.
But the point is that the audio purists saying, "Oh, this sounds better than CD." Well, it can't sound better, can it?
The only thing which can sound more true, if you like, and there is something to be said about this, but in my opinion it's more about the actual product and the artwork and everything like that, is if it's an original tape recording that hasn't gone through any digital stages. But the issue with that is that digital is not a process, it's a storage format. So going through an A to D and D to A stage once is actually probably a lot less damaging or changing to the audio than, for example, sending it. I mean, it is objectively less than sending it through like an analog mastering console. So as long as the person who's doing the mastering and the person in control of the release itself has the right experience and has the right ears and the right aesthetic controls, and everybody's happy, it doesn't really matter where it's gone, whether it's been stored on something and taken off, because, you know, as you'll well know, if you take one analog format and you do a copy of that, the degradation is exponential each time you do that. With digital, at least you can then make a copy and then make a million copies of it. That's kind of the point. I mean, I am for any vinyl purists watching this who are cringing, I own more records than most people who argue on YouTube do put together about records, but I have an understanding of the technology, and you know, part of it is romantic, and it's the physicality, and it's the fact that you do go out and buy them and you put them in your bag, and the sound is different, better or worse, not sure, but there is more noise. You can't can't really debate that, and it is frequency limited. And people will argue that it's not frequency limited, but it is, because this can only move so quickly, and that will only create certain high frequencies. But yeah, I don't want to get into an argument about analog versus digital because they're both legitimate, but vinyl it's cool. That's why it's good. And it's an experience, and it involves a almost like a ritualistic process. Like I went to a record fair the other day, and I had to get a taxi from the record fair. I bought so many records. I bought 18 bootleg, maybe 1920s blues piano recordings, and if there were CDs, I would have bought them also, but they're not on CDs, they're on vinyl. So, you know, you buy it. And also I'm a vinyl DJ as well as being a digital DJ. And it's just, they're both cool. Like technology is cool and fun. Like, why not learn all of them, you know? So I do that as well. And then this player down here is an 18 to 80 RPM transcription player. So this is for playing both analog and electrical recordings on mostly shellac, so old 78s is the general thing you find. And that has a couple of different heads, and that's a thicker stylus, like a conical stylus, for better pickup on that. I've got a couple of these, and then I've got a bunch more bits in the house as well.
Do you do, because one of the formats I don't support is vinyl, so I do almost anything. And people do sometimes ask me, can you transcribe my vinyl? I can't get it anywhere else. And I don't do it. Do you do it? Or is that not something you want to get into?
Well, so I do it at a lower level. So this setup I can make a good recording of, but not as good, for example, as I can with the reel-to-reel. So it depends on the budget and depends what it is. If it's an independent recording and they just want to make an archive and they want it to sound decent, I can do that, and I can clean it, and I can sort out getting it sent off to get it properly cleaned if that's what you need to do. And I can also, recommend people who have a better turntable than this, but will charge quite a bit more for the upkeep. So I have done some of that, but it's mostly small independent labels, more niche things where the cost of getting the highest quality transfer, the returns would be diminishing. It's not worth doing. So I can do that. I mostly use it for quality control. But this player down here, I can do transcriptions of that, and I've got a couple of different phono amps, which again go directly into my console in the middle. So it's all connected and ready to go. It's not something I really advertise, vinyl transfer, but I have done it.
You could get swamped with people wanting to get their old records done, and it's not economic.
No,
People won't pay how much it really costs.
Yeah, it's cheaper to just buy every single reissue than to do that, or to buy a copy of Discogs in very good condition or whatever.
Oh, by the way, something I recognise down there, the harding next to your bin, that's a PCM, that's an F1 player. So presumably you have a PCM F1 or 501 or 601 or 701.
In fact, I've got one of your old thingies down here. That is, the SLF1. That's one that you had in your shed.
Of course, that's one I bought. Yes, I tested them. I did a YouTube video on that.
You did, and you sent it out to me. So I've been keeping that because to be honest, I kind of just like the look of it.
They're nice, aren't they?
I love that early 80s Japanese.
What's horrible about that machine is that if you want to get to the deck, you have to take the whole thing to pieces.
Yeah.
You can't take the top off. You have to take all the whole deck out. And there's flexi cables connecting the PCBs, and the disturbing of those can cause them to break, and then you're in deep trouble. Yeah,
so originally I thought I might have a go at putting that SDIF card on it. It's an SDIF card,
Yeah, that for the decoder part. For the,
and then I saw some people who had attempted to do that, and they'd basically destroyed their machine trying to do it.
Oh, right.
Which is why I think I sold that to you, in fact, actually. I think we did a swap or something. So that was all during the COVID era, so it's all in a blur. So I've got that down there. This is a weird old machine. This Plex writer down here used to be a pretty sought after mastering CD recorder.
Oh, right.
I bought this for £10. This is weird. I'll go into that another time. I was going to do a video on it at some point, but it's so niche that I don't even think anybody will care. Right. And then I've got this is where I actually do my work. So I've got some Focal. These are French monitors. They're not strictly mastering monitors, but I don't really care. I think they're brilliant. I do work on them. Mastering speakers are usually like 30, 40, 50, 60 grand, whereas these are more 6 grand, which is a bit more within my price range.
And they're active, aren't they? I see that.
Yeah, so one of the reasons I've got active speakers is that because of the size of my room, I had to downsize my room when I built this one on my property. And I'd used the Focals before, and not only do they have the amp in the back nice and hidden and it's quite flat, they're front ported, which some people don't like, but the Focals do it very, very well, which means that you can actually have them a little bit further back into the room without getting too much bass distortion. So if you've got a slightly smaller room and you're going to have these, so we're not too far off the acoustic treatment here, the Focals are really good for that. With other brands, I found in the past that you start to move them around in a smaller room and you get pretty wild changes that make you question your entire existence. Also, Focal, they're a really good company, and they make everything themselves. So they're only over the channel in France, but they make these are all, you can see they're all branded. They make all these parts, so if you need to swap them out, you can actually do it here. And the chap that sorted me out with these, a company called SCV, Gary Robson, I used to sell Focal speakers 15 years ago or so, when I used to sell pro audio stuff, when I was a telesales and I bought some off him, smaller ones back then, and I've always used Focals. So they do a massive mastering speaker called a Focal Utopia, which is one day sort of thing. But at the moment we work on these. These are Sennheiser HD600 headphones. These are not particularly great for listening, but they're very good for quality control. So when I'm doing the tests on the vinyl test pressings, and also listening back to stuff that I've exported to make sure there's no issues and make sure there's no glitches, etc., I use these because they're incredibly fast and they're open back, so they'd be no good for taking on a train or whatever. No. But if you've got any distortions, any sort of clipping within the track, or any little tiny glitches, they're really great for picking that up. And I've got the RME ADI2, which has got a built-in really good headphone amp, and it's a very small footprint, but it's incredibly high quality headphone amp and D to A and A to D converter. So that feeds my monitors, and it also, everything records through this, and I've got a load of AES cables and stuff hanging out the back there. And that is basically the main frame of the whole thing. I used to have loads of analog stuff, loads of digital stuff, loads of nonsense, and I realised it was basically irrelevant to what I was doing. Digital is incredible, like what you can do with sound. You're getting the sound in as digital, you're sending it out as digital, running it through an A to D and D to A changes the sound, not always in a good way. I had an epiphany when I built this studio. When I had to put everything back in, I realised that I didn't really want to plug it all back in again. I mean, I like it, I like playing with it, and I've got friends who have recording studios, and I love to go and have a play with it. But yeah, I'm strictly in the box. I just do everything digitally, and I'm as flexible as I can be. I could have a client sending me voice notes on WhatsApp, and I can be doing the adjustments, sending them about, sending it over. Right. Whereas when I was working with analog, it was a lot slower, it was a lot clunkier, and some people like that, and they like that as part of the service, that it's kind of more of an artisan thing. But for me, I do a lot of massive scale work, 8 discs, box sets, huge archives of audio. If I was to say, you have to wait a week for me to do that because I want to run it through 0.5 dBs of this thing, do it in real time, and then quality control that, it's not sustainable. So I moved over to digital about 4 years ago when I built the studio, and I've recently just built this new listening area as minimal as possible. It's just got the things I need in it, my diary, this is metering, the stuff I've just described, and that's it. And I can come in, load up the computer at 8 o'clock in the morning and start doing serious work without any messing about. So that's where I do my stuff.
Do you remember on our trip that fantastic mixing desk? I wonder if that ever found a home, because we didn't really know those guys to do it. So, but that was a lovely piece of kit. That really was.
Yeah, it looks cool. I mean, that's the kind of thing that I've got friends. I mean, I've got several friends in this in Nottingham alone who are into that, and they have big control rooms. They have a lot of stuff to plug in. But it's a different world, because when you're in the recording world, you need to collect microphones, you need to collect backline, amps, preamps, all that kind of stuff. So having a mixing desk to plug it all through having a console is fine. But in mastering, it's 2 channels, and that's it. So I'm very pure about audio. I don't believe in changing anything unless you literally want to change that thing. And when I make my mastering sessions, every single stage of the process has its own individual plugin. Even if it's just one tiny little gain change, I put it in, and I'm really insanely focused on things like gain structure and metering and stuff, because to me that's mastering. That's the skill, is having that level of quality control and being able to do something. If someone says to you, oh, I'd like to hear a slightly brighter version, I'd like to drop a new vocal in, I'd like to do X, Y, Z, you're able to go straight back into your session, adjust stuff, and go back in and give the client what they need. So it's more about providing the level of service that people expect, in 2022. Whereas, back in the 90s, it was CD mastering. It was slow because it was, 1630s and all that kind of business. Whereas now, people will send you a file. They want it back as soon as possible. Right. So yeah, I'm very focused on the sort of service side of things and being able to take on incredibly complicated jobs. And I do spreadsheets and I do backups and I do all that kind of stuff because that's the sort of guy I am. So maybe I should now explain to you what I've got for you here today.
Yes, let's do that.
So I've got all kinds of nonsense.
By the way, I don't know if you some of the kit. I don't know if you realise I've got DTRS and Alesis.
Yeah.
ADAT on SVHS up to 20 bits. That was
Yeah.
8-track. I've got the kit for that, and I can pull it all off at all 8 tracks at once, synchronized.
Yeah.
So if you ever get those tapes,
yeah, well, that's the thing. So I mean, I follow a lot of audio archivists, and people, especially in the States, where there's a lot of master recordings and multi-track recordings, and they're now moving on to doing a lot more. I think you might have seen some of these on YouTube as well, like the ARSC, I think they're called, Association for Recorded Sound Collections. That's it. They've now started doing a separate section with an esteemed colleague of mine, Jessica Thompson, doing archiving the 90s. So they're moving on now to doing educational stuff for those formats, especially the prosumer stuff, and also things like the F1, because they are professional on consumer formats. So there's a lot of confusion to the point that I often buy the wrong things. Like when So if I'll come around and explain what I've got for you. So I've got all kinds of nonsense here. So this is the stuff. This is still mine, but I'll show you it because it's weird and cool.
Yeah.
These are backup formats on tapes for before you could write DVDs, and when hard drives were too small, you'd have these tape loading formats. So I haven't really used these very much. One of these is for exabyte, which is 8mm. So that's an exabyte, 8mm, and that's a DAT. So you can see that is.
Well, of course, I see those normally as domestic video 8 tapes, and what thoroughly annoys me is when I get those in and they've got analog recordings on them,
right?
Because my capture processor aborts every time they leave a gap, and it hits the digital data from that, and it throws the system.
Gotcha. Right. So this is a weird one. This is a DAT size. I think this is a. Yeah, I mean, it would be for backup storage, but that's an internal.
Now, if this is what I'm hoping it is, these can be modified, or you can, with different firmware.
It might already have the firmware on it.
Oh, you can use this to recover DAT, digital audio.
Yes.
And there's some debate about whether that's better or worse than playing back on a DAT machine.
My experience of playing things like exabyte back, I've had exabytes that will load up the DDP information, because you could actually back up CDs onto them. You would deliver them on that before the internet was fast enough. And I've managed to not have them transfer as data, but I've managed to play them as audio. So there are some situations where the errors will work on one side and not the other. So there's a possibility that you might have a DAT which isn't able to play back what's on the tape in real time, but you might be able to dump the information over, which is what people use that for. So it's not even necessarily that one might be a higher quality transfer. It might be that one doesn't work and the other one does, depending on because they're reading at different rates. Yes. So
I also understand that these can be under that condition. You can also use this to play the 24-bit tapes that I've already got equipment for.
Yeah.
And also, because there was as well as being a greater depth, there was also a higher sample rate version of DAT that somebody did. I forget which. I'll look it up. And again, because it's just data as far as this is concerned.
Yeah, as long as I mean, you might have to actually build a computer to do that. That's what I was originally going to do, was put a Windows XP system together. But then I got
SCSI,
bored.
Isn't it?
Yeah, so you've got a couple of different drives here. Now, I can't remember which ones these are, so I'm going to give them all to you. But these are all different potential drives that were on the list of things that you can use with the different data captures of DAT. So these are all PCI, yeah. So I think they're all SCSI. They're slightly different pinouts, but I'm going to give you those because I bought those all at the same time as that. When I watched the video on it and the guy listed them off, I thought, have a look on eBay. I managed to find them all cheap. Never got around to setting it up, so I'm going to give it to you to have fun with.
I'll have fun with that. Yep.
So we'll put that to one side for now. That's going to go in. On to the next weirdness. So I've got something here that you may or may not want, but I'd like to get rid of. This is a professional VHS. It's not particularly.
Not SVHS, it's just VHS. Right?
Yeah. So this is it's in good condition and it works, and the transport's the jog is absolutely fine. So you can have that if you want it. The heads are fine, I think. So that's just a standard VHS recording.
Or let's have a look at the connections at the back. So just yes. Oh, is that mono? I'm surprised at that. Isn't that surprising? The mono audio.
Oh, in and out, yeah.
Yeah. Am I reading that right? That's
There you are.
quite surprising for a professional machine.
I wonder if it might have been used for a closed caption,
Yeah.
or whatever it's called, closed circuit, not closed caption.
CCTV type
Yep.
system. In which case it may have slow, super slow speed thing where it plays back one frame at a time and scans around cameras. That might be what it's for, actually.
Yeah, like on Crime Watch in the 90s.
Yeah, that's right. That could be of interest because there may be then tapes that only this sort of machine
Yeah.
will play.
Well, if anybody's going to get those tapes, it's you.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
We'll put that to one side for now. This is the Tascam branded version. So it's actually a pretty good machine, but I've got nowhere to keep it. So DA20 is essentially the same as the Fostex that I just showed, the D5. And it does all 3 sample rates, which is good. The long play 32, 48. It's in the wrong order for some reason. And it also has, this is a professional machine. This would have been used in either broadcast mostly, or studios, or playback. So this is the sort of thing you might have found in like a cinema or a auditorium or something. So it's got the full Tascam style transport, which is really good. So it's really easy and really quick to use. And then on the back, we have digital input and output on SPDIF, so you can do a straight transfer of that. But you've also got analog in and out output there, and it works. This works absolutely fine. This is just a good workhorse.
I have a Tascam DA30 Mark II, which
it's probably
is on the same sort of progression.
Yeah, that's probably similar, but with without so much recording settings. Generally, with the Tascam stuff, what you'll find is that the lower versions, the less featured versions, will be more for playback and copying, whereas the higher spec ones will be more for recording. So it's actually a little bit of a diminishing return to invest too much in the really, really fancy recorders if you're not planning on doing recorders, because you can get a workhorse that has exactly the same transport, but just doesn't have as much stuff for indexing and stuff like that.
Which we don't need.
Yeah. So next one we've got, again, this is an optional one, but it's got a bit of junk on the top there. This is another really, I mean, I love this stuff, but I just don't know how to put it. This is a Tascam, another professional mini disc player. And again, it has all of the full Tascam style bits and bobs. It has a bunch of different inputs and outputs, including an analog output. So if you have a problem with transferring digital, you can actually record it that way. Lovely big input control there. And then you've got on the back, analog in and out.
Yeah, balanced and unbalanced.
Yeah, balanced and unbalanced. And then you've got two TOS links for recording that. So again, you can do a straight transfer of that. So if you have any just standard non-long play mini discs.
Oh, it doesn't do long play, this one?
No, this one doesn't do long play, but it can read the indexes and everything. It's a professional player, but before long play existed.
Yes.
So that's a little bit limited.
A nice feature has got the keyboard socket.
Yeah, so you can
So
see
you don't want to rename them any other way.
Yeah. So this is a feature that I think Tecmo's done some videos on this, but this is a way that you could add a PS2 keyboard.
I've got one of my Sonys who does that.
Yeah, so this would have been, again, probably for recording backups or programs for broadcast, and then you play it back. So you can do some slightly fancier recording stuff on some of the higher spec ones, but this again is similar to that machine. Is a sort of middle of the road workhorse, but with all the proper transport stuff on it, which is cool. So it's a proper professional. Right, this is one of the weirder ones that you've done a video on before, I think.
I think I have a different model of this. So I've got I forget which model number this one is and what the model numbers I have. But the point of this is that as well as being a standard Video 8 deck, you can record 6 pairs of stereo audio on it, I believe.
In some very low...
yes, I think it's 32... Is it 32 kilohertz sample rate and...
I think it might be 14 or maybe even lower.
I've got a feeling it's 8-bit with 10-bit resolution because they're not even bits.
Right, okay, gotcha. Yeah, so It sounds that way. I did test it. I did run some tones through it.
It's adequate.
Yeah, maybe adequate for certain things. I mean, it's a cool unit. I mean, I really like these. I think this is maybe mid to late 80s.
Yeah, it's adequate.
So you've got that old Sony digital logo.
That's the same logo as used on. The PC,
so that's I really like. I mean, it's a nice pro unit as far as the build quality goes. It's not a rack mounted because it's sort of a prosumer thing. But the transport all works fine. You've got headphone outs in there. The heads are fine. I've managed to, so with all these units that I've managed to get working, I've done some test tone recordings, like different sample rates and stuff that I can to see what the dropout's like, and also see if there's any harmonic distortion. You've also got ×2 on there, which I'm presuming is a playback thing. I'm not entirely sure.
I think the heads are a little worn on mine, so that will be used.
Well,
for sure.
I'll be look forward to the video of you fiddling about with it.
Because that's right. I did a video on that, and I did some test recordings, and it worked. But I'm not sure. It just trouble is, as you say, it wasn't a great format in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, I got.
So because you were getting nowhere with the DMR 2000, you bought another U-matic machine for doing the 1630 work. And then I had to ruin your day by telling you that 1630 is NTSC only.
Yeah, and that was the genesis of this trip, because I thought, you know what, forget it. I can't store another one. So that's all in working condition. I've managed to get tapes to play back on it, but obviously not digital audio. 5800. 5800. Okay, right. So it's the same era and same style as the digital recorders, which is why I got it, because I thought. They're only slightly different, but no, it's a completely different region. One of the cool things about this U-matic deck, which I bought, the V800 PS, I've got this really nice remote here, which works as well. I've tested that, which I wasn't expecting to work, but that's cool. I mean, I like the look of them. I do like playing with them. I just don't like
one thing I should say about these, if anybody's going to buy the 5800, well, kind of don't. Because it doesn't support SP tapes,
right? Which
a lot of tapes are. A lot of the higher end tapes are. There was in the UK there were 3 recording variants in PAL for U-matic. There was the base model, often known as low band. Then there was high band, which uses the same tapes sort of, but some different electronics.
Right.
And you could upgrade these to take high band. And then there's SP. Which use chrome tapes.
Right.
And there's confusion about this because in NTSC land, people call high band not low band, as in the better ones, which are SP, but they never had high band in PAL. You're looking nervous.
Yeah, I was just in case you're standing on the speaker.
So yeah, they didn't have the high band variant in NTSC.
Right, gotcha.
So yeah, people get a bit confused about that.
Yeah, I've sometimes seen them on eBay, and people have said, "Oh, this one was upgraded, but the faceplate is."
It does high band.
Stay away, like.
Yeah, but it does do high band, but it still doesn't do SP because that required different heads and electronics. So
what else have we got? Two remotes here. That's for the VHS, and that's for the video out. So that's probably quite hard to get hold of these days. And then we have on here.
These 1630 cards.
These are 1630 cards, which I think work. So these might actually be swap outable. The PCB looks almost perfect.
We really need to be careful dragging that. That's had some factory modifications, hasn't it?
Oh yeah.
Oh dear, oh dear.
Okay, maybe the other ones are perfect and this one wasn't quite.
No, it looks like a factory.
Yeah, it might be.
Bear in mind, it's all low volume stuff.
I'm trying to think what stuff might have been done to this one. This is taken out of the of a different machine. So we're going
more factory mods.
I'm thinking about the other 1630 that I've got. This was pulled out of a weird thing that I'll show you in a minute. Let's just
the card I didn't have on my 1630 was the RAR card.
Right.
I don't know if any of these are.
I don't know, but I do have another. I do have an entire. That's a written coder. I do have an entire 1630 there that you can have, so that's good. Oh. So those are spare cards. I mean, it might even be that you might even need to just take a chip off one at some point. But this is what I took it out of. Now this is a bit of a pain. So this was somebody's homemade 1610. Well, no, we thought it was. We thought it was a cobbled together version. What it actually is a 1610 and 1630 copy machine. So it's a digital to digital machine. So it has all of the digital I/O of a PCM 1630, but doesn't have the analog A to D, D to A. So this would have been making backup copies. So the cards were taken out of that because I wanted to see what sort of condition they're in, because they're probably more useful out there. But I brought this as well because what it has got is a whole mounting rack for 1630 stuff, and it has a power supply. Now, it's a bit of a pain, this thing, but it's either going to go in scrap metal or you can have that if you can fit it in your car.
So could those cards go back in there?
Yeah, we could.
That'd be the best way to transport them.
Yeah, yeah. So I took those out basically just so I could take a photo of them for you to show to. So
do we reckon this is made by Sony?
No, so they've done a good job on it though. So on the front here we've got 44.1 sync and external play and record. And then you've just got the CRC, mute, and I don't know what EMP means, but they've put emphasis, of course, yeah. So they've put digital on it in a sort of
as close as they could get to that
style. So presumably that would have been put in a rack with a rack of 1630, 1610s, etc. And then they would have put that in alongside it to make it look the same. And this would have been for copying one to the other.
Right.
So this is actually a way that you could make a digital to digital copy with one of these, and another U-matic deck. So it would have been for making probably backup copies or regional copies. So in mastering, what you would often find is you'd have different masters for different regions. So it might be that they would make a bunch of 1630s to send out to the CD replication plants. One might have been Europe, one might have been America, etc. So that probably would have been used for that, for making a carbon copy version of that without having to do a new analog recording. That makes sense. So this is a 1630 that we thought works, but doesn't.
It doesn't. So do you remember what it does or doesn't do?
I couldn't get it to send the encoded signal back out to the U-matic. So I could get analog, I could get the analog audio in to come up on the meters perfect. I could change the sample rate. Right. And we've got some cards. We've got, I don't know what MT is, decoder. That's the sample rate change conversion. So you've got the weird 44.0.56. Another encoder. The D to A and the A to D. So that's a full 1630 as far as doing the basic stuff. So you could record a tape on that and then play it back basically. So that's good. And that's all in good condition on the inside. I just think that something on one of the boards is blown.
Well, hopefully with all the bits I've got, I can make a...
Well, that's one of the reasons why I pulled those out, because I thought, you know, at least if you know what you've got there and they're not all exploded, then... yeah, so last couple of bits. And we can try and get these in the car.
So that's just an analog, ordinary U-matic.
Yeah, that's just a pretty standard U-matic, which viewers of your channel would have seen a million times.
Yeah, although I don't have any non-SP machines. So
right,
it's a model I don't own.
Well, there you go. So we also have...
This looks interesting.
This is a monster.
Really interesting piece of kit.
So when we split the equipment last time, we decided to give you the slightly simpler version of this. Well, it's a different brand, but it was... for doing SDiff to AES and SPDiff, whereas this does a lot more than that, and it's actually got an asynchronous sample rate converter, so it can see anything and change it into anything, which is cool. But you've got 32, 44, 44.1, 47.9, which I've never heard of, 48 and 50, and it's got this auto setting. So if a player can't play back AES, SPDiff, or SDiff, you could plug it into this and you could put on the auto, and because it's got asynchronous sample rate conversion, it should be able to at least latch onto the signal and output it as something like 48 or 44.1. And yeah, so you've also got an auto input. So if you've got a recorder that is unknown what format it's actually recorded in, if it's recorded to a weird consumer format, it also has an auto which will look at that and change it. So that's a proper...
Let's have a look at the rear connectors, because
got a load of DNCs, I think.
Does this support? Well, I think it does. That horrible, SDiff signal. Now this is really key. It took me years to get hold of a machine to do this job, because when you play back from PCM 1630, its output signal is a weird digital format, comes out on 3 connectors. Yep. One for each channel plus word,
which is what we've got here. The word sync.
Yeah. So. And the problem being that that's hard to convert to anything modern.
You've actually got a full in and out on SDiff there. So if you ever needed to troubleshoot the SDiff on one of the machines.
So now I have a backup.
Yep.
I don't know if you saw on some of my older videos, the way I tackled this
Yes.
was to modify a DAT machine.
Yep.
There was a particular DAT machine that could take SDiff, and I modified it to go E to E.
Yep.
And it was clunky, but it did work. But
Yep.
it was clunky. I had to build a circuit that kept on pressing the record button.
Yes, I remember, yeah.
What a bodge up. So yeah, it's great to have a backup.
That should, in theory, just do it. And it's got dual AES in and out, so you can go straight from any of those weird formats in one box, straight out to your recorder in proper modern AES 3. So that's everything we've got.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Shall we start moving this into the car, Scott? So big thank you to Joe for all this fantastic equipment. I'm going to have good fun playing with that, and of course all this stuff will appear on YouTube later. So rather than me trying to say to anybody what it is you do, you try to explain.
Yep, so I'm Joe Caithness. This is Joe Caithness Mastering in my house, and I do masters for digital, CD, vinyl, and I also do transfer of specific master recordings. So I do 1/4 inch tape, I can do quality control for vinyl and DAT, cassette, and other bits and bobs if you need me to. But you can go on my website, joecaithnessmastering.com, and it's got all my credits and all the bits and bobs that I do, and the list of formats that I can transfer. So
Super.
fantastic.
Thank you very much indeed. Bye for now then. So, hello Chris, I've got something for you.
Lovely.
Excuse me.
Always useful.
So this was the machine I managed to find some working heads for and swapped it over.
Oh, fabulous.
So now you have an AG47, that's the Panasonic K mechanism, returned to Chris. So there we are.
With non-effed heads.
Yes, that's
Thank
right.
you so much.
Right.
Good man, thank you. Don't find a good home.
This is all the other clobber I've just been picking up here. So
Wow.
it's all my stuff, most of which will mean nothing to you. But there's a VHS machine here I wanted to show you. I just want to show you and see if you can spot what's weird about this video recorder.
Mrs. 99 is going to be thrilled.
So it's a VHS, right?
Right.
So it's a VHS professional machine.
Sony, right?
Sony, so it's not rubbish.
Good, mate.
SVO
1320p.
1320p and a few.
Standard front.
Yeah. So that looks like, okay, it's not super VHS, but it still looks like a half decent machine. And it's obviously built around about, what would you say, mid-90s, something in that area.
Yes,
isn't
one
it?
of the
Yeah.
later models.
So can you tell me what's strange about that machine?
No.
Have a good look at it.
I'm not quite sure. It's remote control in and out audio, foot SW and video
Foot switch
in
for some reason, yeah?
Yes. Half the things you'd think that would be on there, like it's not Super VHS, there's
No,
S-Video.
so there's no S-Video, that's normal for VHS machine.
But there's no. Okay. Help. That just looks
Audio, what's the strange thing about audio?
odd. In and out. One single, mono.
Mono?
It's 2 sockets, but it's in and out, not left and right.
Exactly. So what's a machine of this vintage and quality doing being mono?
Okay.
That's
Is it CCTV equipped or
I
something?
think it might be. That is a possibility. We need to look it up. It's just so unusual for a machine of this quality and vintage. You'd
Yeah.
expect it some horrible sort of Matsui thing from, you know.
Well, it's a
from the
Sony, so
vintage.
they're not going to do it by error.
No, that's right. There's going to be a reason. So it must be that sound doesn't matter.
Yes. CCTV or
Or
frame.
slow-mo type thing.
Yes.
Yeah, it might be.
Any clues in here? Tape speed? No. Auto repeat key inhibit. NTSC playback. Full proper NTSC playback. Not automatic.
So it's not junk, but yet it's
Mono.
linear mono. How odd. So I'm going to have to go and look up the model number and see if we can find out why such a machine was ever built.
Well, I almost got that. Needed your help.
Pushed in the right direction.
Of my old monster. If I put that on your boot
Yes.
there, then you can. The last of my old Monster HP
Workstations.
workstations, all well protected. These weigh a ton.
They're well made, aren't they? They're stupendously well built. That's still got its film on it.
I
Oh,
know.
we'll have to do a peeling off session later. for that.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Some people really like that. So, of course, what you have in here is access to your cards here. This little thing pops up now. These graphics cards were odd, weren't they? They hit that wonderful sweet spot of being incredibly expensive and yet completely rubbish.
NVIDIA, well, it's a 5800
Yeah.
Quadro. Yeah, they were very expensive.
They were made for a particular purpose, weren't they? I think it was like for CAD work and that sort of thing.
Yes.
They weren't made for example, you can't do live video capture of the screen with one of these. So one of the things I've used is WF GUI, which is wow flutter measurement, and I've captured it on YouTube. But you can't with that graphics card.
Well, that was in situ for about 4 years. Didn't miss a beat.
I didn't
retire it. I just moved offices and got new computers, so it just sat there connected, unloved and unused. You need to sort of pull it up, pull it out.
Trying to remember how to do
one
that
on that one, one on that one.
Ah, yeah.
I think sometimes you have to undo that first.
Oh, right. That's a subtly different design to the other ones I've seen, I think.
Well, this is an 820,
Right.
which is the top of the range. I think there might have been an 840, but the 800s, 820s, 840s all had slightly different designs. But
so that's got fans built into here and there, and then these great big heat sinks on the two processors. Can you see those, Scott?
Well, I've zoomed in.
All right. And then we've got memory slots in there. Not many filled, so there's a potential for upgrading that a little bit. And this is a big slide-out power supply, because I've repaired one of those when the input filters went literally up in smoke, which was quite exciting.
It worked faultlessly for, as I say, a number of years, and then I just moved offices and it got unloved.
Just became spare, so let's see if we can make use of that one.
That has to fit into the power supply.
And these have more SATA ports than you know what to do with, because they're really servers, aren't they? Or that's one of the things they can do is be a proper server, so you can put loads and loads of disks on these. Oh, externally, I think, is one of the things you can fit lots of external. It's like eSATA, but I'm not sure it is eSATA. It's a RAID system.
Back in the day, this was about £6,000–7,000.
They weren't cheap, were they? That's right. And I mean the build quality. Look at the etched instructions. I mean the build quality is absolutely stupendous.
Shows you what all your sockets are for and how to. There's a special clever way of filling up your RAM. So,
Right.
You know, you've got to be 1, 3, 5, 7.
Right.
You can't just stick them all in one corner.
Right.
But you know that.
Great. Thank you very much indeed for that. And I've got a long journey home now, and we'll demonstrate all this on YouTube in due course.
I'll await the phone call in 2 weeks where you say it's blown up.
Oh no, I'm sure it'll be fine.
Thanks, Carl.
All the best. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. We've learned a lot about audio mastering, something that shows that however long I am in this business, there's so many more things around the periphery that I know really nothing about. Now, one of the things I don't know a great deal about is SCSI. So if anybody out there is an expert on SCSI, please give me some advice. We have this, what model is it? It's a Archive 4320 DAT machine, and that has a 50-way SCSI connector and a set of switches that are all in the on position, which I think means that they're applying the termination resistors. So I would need to connect that, I believe, by a straight through 50-way cable to one of these SCSI cards, all of which have those 50-way connectors on them. Is there any preference for which of these I should try to use? Anything I should be looking out for in terms of connecting one of those up? And what sort of computer I would need? Do you think a machine, something like a Windows 10 machine, would support SCSI and these cards, which seem to be dated around about the year 2000? So if anybody has information on this DAT machine or the using SCSI, please let me know. Also, if you have a 50-way SCSI cable, that could be handy too. Now, I'll be doing lots of videos in the future, of course, looking all the equipment we took in and testing it and doing some repairs, especially to the PCM stuff. So do please come by and watch me work on those in the future. Bye for now.